down here and doing bar. By the way, you can make about 50 grand a year doing bar if you're in the right place. And he said, what do you think I should do? And I said, go back to school. You already got school day. Go back to school and get a master's in business. He said, where should I go? And I said, go to the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. He says, why should I go there? Because I went there, and they're going to ask you, any of your parents' alumni, and you're going to say yes, and they're going to say, check the box. It's called legacy admission. They give you an advantage. Why should that happen? It happens. Why should it happen? Why should we give preference to Spanish? A young lady in class just before, she applied to an Ivy League school, she got accepted, and she says, one of the reasons I'm accepted is because I'm Latin American. Trying to distribute reward. Now, she qualified, trying to distribute reward in a diverse way rather than just through academic merit. Because they were excluded at one point. Women were excluded at one point. There's an example, hang on, there's an example after World War I that Jewish people and Catholic people made up a large portion of Harvard student body, and the donors and the Protestant population, white Protestant population, were offended by that, and so the Harvard school decided, quote, in order to protect the Jewish and the Catholic people, they would limit the number of students that could be Jewish and Catholic, protect them from anti-Semitism. And they got taken to court, and the court said you can't do that. You can have a quota for inclusion, but you can't have a quota for exclusion. Right now, Asian Americans are in front of the court right now arguing that they are excluded more often than other ethnic groups. And they have the highest scores. Well, the court has said, in Cheryl Hopwood's case, and I'll go over that in detail on Wednesday, that the school, in order to promote diversity, will not lower the academic standards. There's a window. So even though other people had lowered, they had the window. They have a right to set their policy to include diversity. So they can have a quota system to reflect the population. What they can't do, and this came up with another case at Harvard called the Bakke case, where they had a certain percentage set aside for an ethnic group, and they couldn't find enough to fill it, and so they left it blank. And Bakke says, why can't I have one of the seats? The people you want to have the seats aren't qualified. There aren't enough of them to fill in. Why can't I fill in? And the court said he was right. You can have a quota system, but you can't use it to exclude. It's there to be inclusive, to try and level the playing field. Qualified people academically, but other considerations can be made. So some of us don't think it's fair. I understand it's a reasonable argument. You work hard to get a grade. What else are you doing to prove to me that you're academically qualified? I'm not looking at anything else. I'm not under any pressure to make this ethnically balanced. You get an A, you get an A. You get a B, you get a B. You get a C, you get a C. WYSIWYG, it's an old computer term. What you see is what you get. But when you get to the next level up, see, right now, because there's no qualifications to be here, they don't have to worry about these standards of diversity, because anybody can come to a community college. We have open enrollment. Anybody can come here. You're free to try. If you fail, but if you succeed, in fact, we even have a direct pathway now, where you go right to the four-year college in Florida. If you have your AA degree or AS degree, you go right through. It's called pathway admissions. We set it up that way. The state set it up that way, so you can go right to the next level. But once you get to that next level, you will have to meet certain qualifications academically, but they will also look at a lot of other things to see if you qualify. Sports may be one of them. Student government may be another. Different activities you do in the community. And the court says, this is the thing now that solidifies diversity as opposed to just academic merit. The court says that the school has the right to set its mission statement the way it wants it to be. And therefore, you have no right to be included if you don't fit the mission statement. Well, wait a minute, what just happened to Harvard when they excluded Jews and Catholics because there were too many of them and they were getting all the static from their alumni and donors? The court said you can't do that, but to reflect society, you can set quotas to try and fill, given that they meet the academic standards that you're looking for. The argument is then, it's always been that, should it just be based on academic standards, or should it be based on academics plus diversity? I mean, try and look at it this way. If you're just one ethnicity, 35 and there's 20 seats, 15 of you are not going to be included, and we can't use the ethnicity argument. You just don't qualify. There aren't enough seats. I don't mean you don't qualify, there aren't enough seats for you. Limited space. How do we go about making that decision? Should it be 51% women and 49% men? Because biologically there's 51% women and 49% men. As long as you all qualify. What would be wrong with that? You all qualify. You're all 4 O's. What would be wrong with saying that we're going to have 51% women and we're going to have 49% men to reflect the society? What would be wrong with that? I've had women doctors before. I've had male doctors before. I've had ethnic diversity. I had Hispanic. I've had African American. It doesn't matter to me. When you're in combat, you all bleed red. It don't matter. And this is a dilemma. You work hard for your grades for a reason. Shouldn't you be rewarded? So the balance is, here people, this is a utilitarian argument. The greatest happiness for the greatest number. You notice the greatest happiness for the greatest number does not exclude unhappiness. We try and minimize unhappiness to promote happiness. Not everybody's going to get a seat at the table with utilitarianism. Whatever it is, it's not going to work. The meritocracy is what we call moral deserts. You work hard, why shouldn't you get the reward? If you work hard for an A in here, why shouldn't you get an A? Get a B, get a C. You're working hard. So I have 2 students at the end of the semester. One's got 89.3 and another's got 89.3, and both say, can I have an A? Well, I noticed one didn't take the last 3 quizzes. And another one took all the quizzes, either a little better or pretty steady, working hard. Who should merit the reward of their efforts? Now this is subjective, isn't it? How many of you know when you go to admissions, there are people there who are examining not just merit, not just grades, they're trying to decide on other things like student government, like working outside. It's a very subjective decision. Who do I give an A to? The one who didn't take the last 3 tests? Or the one who took the last 3 and came so close and... or nobody? Because the only thing that counts is academic merit. See the problem there? If you're sitting there with 89.3 and you've worked hard, I understand why I get an email asking, is there any way I can give you an A? If you haven't done the work, your argument loses strength because you haven't worked for it, at least the meritocracy. Now how about the utilitarian argument? Bless you. Bless you. You'll get to it in a minute, but I want to make sure you get, okay, you get the blessing. Okay, cool. So like people, there's an upside and there's a downside to all these arguments. There's certainly an upside to meritocracy. It's why I go to school and work hard. But admissions is not based solely on that. Did I ever tell you when I got out of the military, I went to get a job with a Hispanic community position called Cristo Rey? Did I ever mention that in here? Cristo Rey addressed the Latin community in Lansing, Michigan, in the capital. And I spoke Spanish. So I went and applied for the job. And the interview is running, before me is running late. So I'm sitting there and bored out of my gourd, and I just happened to open my book, and I drew a picture of a tombstone. I wrote my epitaph. I have no idea what I wrote. I don't remember, but I remember doing this. And then I closed the book, and the guy comes out of the office. He says, okay, you're in. So I go in. We sit down, hello, 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 hello. And he says, by the way, before we start, I'm curious, what would you like for an epitaph on your tombstone? So I just opened the book and showed him. Freaked him right out. Who told you I was going to ask that? I said, nobody did. So we had the interview, and we're all done. I said, to have the job? And he said, no. I said, why not? He said, I'm afraid, he said, you intimidate me. I'm afraid you'll take my job from me. I said, here's the deal. I said, you hire me and I'll push you up the ladder. It's called the Peter Principle. You get to a point where you have a job that you're really not qualified to do anymore. I said, I'll push you up the ladder. You keep going up, getting better pay. And when you get to the top and you're no longer good at it, I'll push you off the ladder and then I'll take your job. But we can work together and I can push you up the ladder. And he said, no. Well, it was obvious I merited. The reason I wasn't given the job was because I intimidated him. Well, what kind of subjective value is that? I intimidated you? I've had people my whole life say, you intimidate people. Do I intimidate anybody in here? I am intimidating, I accept that. Type A's are pretty intimidating to people, but I don't go out of my way to do it. He was intimidated and blamed me for it, and denied me access, opportunity to get a job. Didn't matter that I was a vet, didn't matter about my background, anything, just, no, you intimidate me. No. Well, how do we decide it, people? How many of you are okay with affirmative action? It's okay if you are. Just a handful. How many of you are okay with meritocracy? What if in favor of meritocracy you still don't get a seat at the table? Would that change your point of view? Like more women? Have you noticed here? I'm not complaining. About 2/3 of the faculty are female, and 3/4 of the administration is female. In fact, do any of you take Professor Himmelho, Luz Himmelho, Spanish? I was at her interview committee. It was between her and a fellow from French Quebec, Canada, who interviewed over the phone. I've never heard anyone do it. You have to do a 10 to 15 minute teaching. Never heard anybody do it over the phone. Hard to make that decision. And there's a gentleman at school, his name is Amani Asukili, who's part of the diversity here. And we asked Amani, he won't decide, but we asked him, he said, Amani, what would you suggest? And he says, well, it's not just about how many, it's not just about what ethnicity, it's not just about what gender, it's about positions and also power. And he said, you know, it would make sense if you wanted to hire the male. But he wasn't saying hire him. He said it would make sense to him to balance things out. Diversity at school. Do you believe we have diversity at school? And we decided on Professor Himmelho, a woman. We just inched him out just a little bit. We tilted the scale as far as female-male goes, even further to the female side. She's a great teacher. If you ever have her, you'll learn Spanish in two years. You'll be able to speak Spanish with her. So the real argument is this then. It's not whether you agree with meritocracy, it's not whether you agree with diversity, it's whether the school has the right to set its own policies to the exclusion of other people. So let me play you one more quick little tape, again by Dr. Sandel.
And this indeed was the argument that Harvard made when it filed a friend of the court brief to the Supreme Court in the 1978 case, affirmative action case, the Bakke case. And the Harvard brief, the Harvard rationale, was cited by Justice Powell, who was the swing vote in the case, upholding affirmative action. He cited that as providing the rationale that he thought was constitutionally acceptable. Harvard's argument in its brief was this: we care about diversity. Scholarly excellence alone has never been the criterion of admission, the sole criterion of admission to Harvard College. 15 years ago, diversity meant students from California and New York and Massachusetts, city dwellers and farm boys, violinists, painters, and football players, biologists, historians, and classicists. The only difference now, Harvard argued, is that we're adding racial and ethnic status to this long list of diversity considerations. When reviewing the large number of candidates able to do well in our classes, Harvard wrote, race may count as a plus just as coming from Iowa may count, or being a good middle linebacker, or pianist,